Hello, everyone. Today, I wanted to talk about the playoff series of the Pittsburgh Penguins versus the New York Islanders, which unfortunately is the only series in this round that I do not have a shirt for either team. But luckily, it will be the only series unless if everything goes completely wrong for this with until the conference finals. Well, conference final, more so the semifinals this season. Which makes me wonder if they're gonna give out the Prince of Wales or the other one's not coming to my head, but the conference champion trophies this year. If they're just gonna give it to each of the finalists, or if they're not gonna give it out this year. Just a little interesting question there. We're going into the series. You have the Penguins, who have a 37-16-3 record for 77 points, which is really good, especially for a team that I expected was going to fall out of a playoff spot this season. With their older players and their core, I expected to kind of start to regress, and a couple of them did, but they got really good performances from other players too. And then on the Islanders side, 32 games 32 wins, 17 losses, and 7 overtime losses for 71 points, which is a solid season. But the way they started the season, usually expect more than that. And if the Islanders were playing the way that they were playing at the end of the season, and the Rangers were playing the way they played at the end of the season, minus the last couple of games, Rangers would have absolutely been in a playoff spot over the Islanders. But at the end, though, Islanders are in the playoff spot, Rangers aren't, and we're talking about Penguins Islanders playoff series. But going into the player stats, to start it off for the Penguins, you have Sidney Crosby, to the surprise of nobody, with 55 games played, 24 goals, 38 assists for 62 points. And that's a really solid season for him. And Crosby is still one of the best players in the NHL. At a time, he was the best until Connor came into the league. I think that he's still around a top 10 player in the NHL, pushing top 5. But there's a couple players that I really do think have taken the edge over him, and he has had slight regression in his game, but he's still a phenomenal player. Moving on to number 2 on the team is Jake Guentzel, with 56 games played. He has 23 goals and 34 points for 57 points. 34 assists for 57 points, which that is above a point a game. Those two players are the only two on the team to be above a point a game, and he's really coming into his own. He's a young, extremely talented player, and he's a reason why when the Penguins do start to regress, because their older players like Crosby and Malkin are getting into their regression, they'll still be afloat because of players like Malkin who are just phenomenal players for them, and they're young, and players like him and Rust are really going to help them for the long term. And third on the team in points is Chris Letang, 55 games played, 7 goals, 38 assists for 45 points. What I'm realizing with a lot of these teams, though, these top-end teams, they have a star player usually in their top 3 in scoring, or at least high up there. And 45 points for Chris Letang, it's a lot better than I expected from him. I expected a lot more regression from him this year, but if anything, he got better this year than he was last year. And overall, though, very solid season for a player that I think most of us kind of discounted how good he is. And if he put up a couple more points, he would have been in that conversation up there for a Norris Trophy, I think. But overall, though, age is a thing. When you get up to that age, usually they don't look to you as much, except Mark Giordano, who had that phenomenal season. And people are already starting to discount Letang's skill, which I think it's too soon for that. Moving on to the Islanders side, you'll notice the scoring is a lot lower there. We're third on the Penguins. Chris Letang has the exact same amount of points as first on the Islanders. Matt Barzal, who has 55 games played, 17 goals, 28 assists for 45 points. Matt Barzal is amazing. And on any other team but the Islanders, he would be well above a point a game. It's a bit of a shame for him that he's on the Islanders for individual stats reasons, But overall, he can still put up numbers like this with a team that really struggles to put the puck in the back of anyone else's net. And Barzal is absolutely not part of the problem. If they had another player like Barzal, they would be a top-end team. Unfortunately, though, they don't have another player anywhere close to the level of Barzal. And it's really the reason why this team struggles in the late game. Moving on, second on team is Josh Bailey with 54 games played, 8 goals, 27 assists for 35 points. And now that's a huge drop from Barzal. From 45 points to 35 points. It's really the reason, like I was saying, that this team struggles. And I really like Bailey. I think he's a solid player. But overall, I'd probably say that he's around a second liner, ideally. Like an average second liner. And they're relying on him for the second most points. Granted, he would be third most points if Anders Lee wasn't hurt. But overall, I do think that is a bit rough. Third on the team in points, though, is Jordan Eberle. 55 games played, 16 goals, 17 assists for 33 points. And I just find it kind of funny how a few years ago, the Eberle for Strome trade seemed so one-sided in favor of Eberle. And now that Strome has found a home in New York, and he's insane with them, Strome's stats are much better than that. And you have to wonder, if the Islanders kept Strome, would he have had that same magic and been able to have the points that he's having with the Rangers? And that'd be, I think, second or first on their team in points, actually. But I digress from that. But Eberle is a very solid player. And the Islanders have a bunch of players that I would say are solid second liners. Probably enough to seep into the third line, which they have, I would argue, the best depth in the NHL on offense. But that depth scoring isn't enough to make up for the lack of top-end scoring sometimes. And now, the special players that I wanted to focus in on the Penguins, I don't think Kasperi Kapanen gets enough respect. When he got traded to the Penguins, I thought that it was phenomenal. I thought he would slot right in on that top line with Crosby, because they've always been missing that one winger. And when Galchenyuk come in, it was supposed to be him. I think it was supposed to be Zucker when he came in too. And Zucker did fine, but he wasn't anything exceptional. Kapanen has been doing great. I'm not 100% if he is in that spot in the lineup. But when he was traded, everyone was saying, yeah, he can be a top 6 forward if needed, but ideally he's a third liner. I heard that a lot. He's putting up top 6 stats this year. 40 games played, 11 goals, 19 assists for 30 points. 3 points every 4 games is really solid. And I've been a huge fan of Cappen ever since he was on the Leafs. And this move to Pittsburgh, I think that it's perfect for him. And it's exactly what his career needed. And didn't get enough time in Toronto to really prove himself. And now he gets it, and now he really gets to show what he can do. Moving on to the Islanders side. On the other hand, Kyle Palmieri, 17 games played, 2 goals, 2 assists for 4 points. I don't know if this is them sheltering his minutes, because the stats have been better recently, but not much. Overall, it's still only 4 points overall. But he was the second best forward in New Jersey, next to Nico Hischier. Jack Hughes took that step forward, and you could argue him, but he's still a top 3 forward for the team there. And he was putting up well over a point every other game. And now here, he's struggling. He's really struggling. It's almost 1 point every 5 games, which isn't great for... I think that they traded for him to be Anders Lee's replacement because of his injury. And giving up a first-round pick for this little production isn't good. And they really need him to either pick it up, or they need somebody else to break out if they really want to beat the Penguins and go far in the playoffs. And I think I've said enough bad things about the Islanders. Let's talk about some good things, though. Go on to the goaltending. Islanders have magic with goalies. I don't know if it's if it's an amazing goalie coach. I don't know if it's the defensive system. I don't know if it just goalies do good there. And there's evidence for both sides. Thomas Greiss is evidence of goalies of it being the defense, but Lehner is also evidence of either at the goalie coach or goalies find their game there. Look at Semyon Varlamov, though. Vezina level season, pretty much. I could see him being a finalist. I don't see him winning. I think it's going to be Vasilevsky, and then runner-up Connor Hellebuyck. But Varlamov will definitely make make his mark this season for contending for it. In 36 games played, he had a 204 goals against average and a 929 save percentage. It's phenomenal. Almost 2 goals a game in 36 games played. That's numbers that some third string goalie that plays 3 games and puts up a shutout in one of them would put up. It's phenomenal to see this, and he had the Rangers number this season. Every game that they put him in, I think we got shut out. It was unreal to watch Varlamov play, and I was always a believer in it being the defense, but Rangers had some games that they were really outplaying them, and just Varlamov was insane, and he's an amazing goalie, and I could really see if they keep going forward, it'll be their defense, and it'll be Varlamov. But their backup goalie's really making a case for him getting some games in the playoffs too. Elias Sorokin, in 22 games played, has a .217 goals against average and a .918 save percentage. The goals against average is similar to Varlamov's, even though Varlamov's is better. But his save percentage is somewhat significantly lower. So overall, I would give the starting job to Varlamov. But if they have to go to Sorokin, they're not poor off. It's not like they're going to some crappy backup goalie. Like, he's really good still. Now, on the flip side of goaltending, moving on to the Penguins, they've struggled to find consistency in net. Both of these goalies have had phenomenal performances this season, but struggle to put up the good numbers consistently. Tristan Jarry had the majority of the starts this season. In 39 games played, he had a .275 goals against average and a .909 save percentage, which is average, but I would say that his team is above average defensively, slightly. So, numbers should be a tiny bit better, I think, but they're not awful. And I don't know much about advanced stats, but I know when I look at advanced stats boards, he's usually near the bottom of the league in goalies. So, I can't speak for what that is, but apparently, according to those, he's not too good. And Casey DeSmith was stealing starts late in the season. Right now, he's injured, but he is expected to be back soon. In 20 games played, he has a .254 goals against and a .912 save percentage. Those are the about average stats that I would expect for a Penguins goalie. And it's nothing amazing like when Matt Murray first came in or anything that they ever got out of Marc-Andre Fleury. But they're serviceable. And as long as the team can score goals and keep the puck out of their own end, those are the numbers that you want from your goaltender. And you have a fighting chance, especially with Crosby, Malkin, and Letang on your team still. Moving on to the records against each other. Pittsburgh's really had the Isles number this season. They've beaten them in the season series 6-2-0, and the Islanders went 2-4-2 against them. So, overall, though, you could see Penguins really had their number, and Islanders really need to flip the story on its head if they want to come out on top. And going for the goals, 4 goals against average. Oh, sorry about that. Dropped the board. But Penguins are second in the NHL in goals for, with a .345 goals for per game. And I usually go for their goals for and goals against, but I want to jump over to the Islanders real quick. Their goals against is .223, which is second in the NHL. So you have the second best offense in the NHL versus the second best defense. This can either be a really entertaining series because there will be a bunch of goals, or at least a back and forth game, or the series could suck. Because honestly, watching Islanders games, it was kind of boring this year. And they would struggle to keep my interest because it'd be the slow defensive system. It wins games, but it's boring to watch. But that's why their defense is so amazing. It's everyone plays defense. They don't need a star defenseman because all 6 defensemen are phenomenal defensively. All of their forwards are phenomenal defensively. And they really just need someone to score because if you move on, their goals for is a .271, which is 20th in the NHL, which is a far cry from a playoff team. But that goals against is so good that they managed to get in and get in comfortably. And compare that to the Penguins' goals against. They had a .277, which is 13th in the NHL, which is about average. But having the second best goals for and the 13th best goals against, that's why they're one of the best teams in the NHL. I wouldn't put them at the level of Colorado, Vegas, or Carolina, but they're right below that level, I would say. Moving down to the one player that can make huge impacts, or just the one thing that could sway the series. Jeff Carter was traded for at the deadline by the Penguins, and it was kind of seen as like, okay, it'll fill out the bottom 6, help them with their depth. No, he's been great. He has been much better than some bottom 6 player. His stats with the Penguins so far, in 14 games played, he had 9 goals, 2 assists for 11 points, which is unreal for a player that really wasn't doing much with LA and was seen to be on the downslope of his career. In LA, in 40 games played, 8 goals, 11 assists for 19 points. His assists went down, definitely, but he has more goals in his 14 games with Pittsburgh than he did in his entire 40 games with LA. And it's just been a phenomenal fit with them. And if they go far in the playoffs, he's going to have a huge impact in that. And he's playing with either Crosby or Malkin. I'm not sure which. But whichever one it is, they're really... It's a beautiful fit on whichever line he's playing with. I'm moving to the Islanders. I'm sorry again. Unfortunately for them, I do have to go with a little bit of a negative here. Anders Lee. So Anders Lee this season, 27 games played, 12 goals, 7 assists, 19 points. They need that in their lineup. That'd be right up there, right behind Barzal in points. And that's their goal scorer. Barzal feeds him the puck, he puts it in, and that's your magic there for the Islanders. Fortunately, he got hurt this season. He is done for the year. Their record before Anders Lee went down with injury, 17 wins, 6 losses, and 4 overtime losses, which is a phenomenal record. They were one of the top teams in the NHL. And then since then, 15, 11, and 3. If you add together the losses and overtime losses, they're 1 game above 500, if you count it that way. But overall, the record was still pretty good. Late in the season, their record did start to drop a bit, which overall is why I'm picking the Penguins to beat the Islanders in 5 games. I just don't see a way that the Islanders can push through unless they can completely stop Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Guentzel, and even Carter and Cappen now. They have a lot of players to shut down, but if any team can shut down another team's offense, it's definitely the Islanders. So I'd like to hear what you guys think. Leave a comment below of how you think the series is going to go, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.